Good afternoon, everybody. There is absolutely a buzz in the room, and I think it's beyond, the reason is beyond the great lunch. You've obviously had a good morning. I'm Marika. This is Stephen, just in case you got us confused. And we are part of a group of people who are part of communities who are trying to create a movement. Who has heard of the Compassionate Communities movement? Okay, there's quite a few hands. Can you give me one word to describe what you think it's about? Shout it out. Connection.
Friendship.
Friendship.
Community.
Community.
Support.
Support. Not really rocket science, is it? And you're absolutely right, it is all that stuff. Some time ago, when people were dying, somebody thought, you know, this really can only be controlled and helped by professionals, because only professionals can help people to die. In many ways, we as people, as communities, as cultures, have forgotten or have lost our way, and certainly our understanding around how do you have a good end of life. And the Compassionate Communities model, in a real sort of snapshot, is about trying to reclaim that. How do we support people at end of life? Now, we have a strict 28 minutes, and Christina is there saying, you better not speak more than 28 minutes. And those of you who know me and then know Stephen saying that's almost impossible. However, we're going to absolutely try and breeze through this. We really started off...
Do there?
No, I don't know what I did, but I just didn't know what to do, obviously.
The arrows.
The arrows. Okay. We started off with some key questions, as this movement has, and particularly in northern Sydney. If mums, dads, brothers, sisters, teachers, friends, neighbours knew how to talk about end of life, dying and bereavement. If communities know what to do when one of their own is dying. If the fear of dying and death was replaced with an acceptance that death was a natural part of life. If families and their communities are able to find the right support at the right time, then we would have compassionate communities. So those questions were the questions that we began to ask to help us understand how do we build compassionate communities. Stephen is often known as the father of ComCom in the Northern Beaches. Well, I'd certainly call him that. I don't know if he's known as that, but it's called other things as well. As a local GP and an absolute community activist, Stephen said to me several years ago, Marika, we have to do this. We have to work together to try and build a shared and new understanding of end of life. He's going to share with you where that all came from, Stephen. Over to you.
So thank you everyone for coming today. You can hear me well? Yeah, good, great, that's fantastic.
The microphone.
So that's the mic.
Not the microphone there.
Oh, that's the microphone. This is something else. I thought it looked like a microphone. So I'm a doctor, but the essence of this movement, social movement, is that it shouldn't rely on doctors. So I better just disappear and leave it to you. Anyone can be part of a compassionate community. Death has, as Marika said, been monopolised by doctors and nurses and institutions. My dad was a GP, and I would sit round the dinner table listening to stories. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't improved some parts of palliative care, but certainly what he was describing in those days, and he'd been working through the 1930s, 40s and 50s, and then into the 1970s even, was very different to what we have today. More people died at home than died in hospital or nursing homes. Nowadays, when they do surveys, 70 or 80% of people want to die at home, and only 20% do so. So, reliance on the medical system has led us down a dreadful, and I use that word advisedly because people dread death these days. And other cultures, I'm not saying that we welcome death, but we know enough about it to know that it's inevitable. And it's unsustainable what we have in our health system. We can't afford to have everyone dying, and increasing numbers of people, of course, as population rises, are going to die. Because people live longer doesn't mean we're going to have more people dying, because however long you live, you're going to die. But we have a growing population, particularly on the northern beaches, of older people. Normal chapter of life, we need to give death back to community. Now, Australia is way behind other parts of the world where they're talking about integrated care, which means that you've got the doctors and the nurses, the whatevers, but that you have to involve community in care at all levels of care, and death being particularly one of those times. So I'm going to put the watch there so that I know what we're doing. Now, am I pushing the right one? Did I do two? No. Yes, there we go. So we talk about death literacy. You've all heard of health literacy, but we now talk of death literacy. And people can discuss that back and forward. But it is the same as health literacy, but if you call it health literacy, people will do all the stuff about viruses, and you don't need antibiotics, and you must not take antibiotics unless you need to, and all of that. Death literacy is very different because it's talking about something that is normal and natural. It's not an infection, it's not an illness. And that is best dealt with through the community. There are many compassionate cities in the world as part of this movement. And compassionate cities have schools, sporting clubs, teachers, community leaders, people on the street, taxi drivers, cafe owners, you name it. They are all involved in this concept of compassionate communities. And they do very well now in international statistics in keeping people out of hospital and caring for them at home. So we're hoping, I'd like to see local councils in Sydney become compassionate cities. The Groundswell Project has been responsible for bringing this concept to Australia. It's been going about 9 years, and it's called Groundswell because the concept of compassionate communities is not that it's doctor-led, which is where I have to change hats. I'm just a community member. It's from the grassroots up. It's worth just making a note, Groundswell Project, because a lot of this and more is on their website. So Marika's described this already. We want to live in a world where every person, every family and every community knows what to do when someone is dying or grieving. International leader, Dying to Know Day. Dying to Know Day is coming up on August the 8th. And if you go on the Groundswell site, it will show you on a map everywhere in Australia that has a Dying to Know event. And there'll be a lot of literature there, and it'll be a lot of fun. It started with just a handful, and I think it was over 500 Dying to Know Day events last year. So it is growing. It's a social movement, and want to really stress that. This is political. This is political in its real sense. It's bringing about change. So a little bit about the language. Care. We all love care. Care's added on to everything. Community care, Northern Beaches. Palliative care, nursing care. Care. We have in this room, I'd say 99.9% women. Hands up the men, I can see them here. We're a beleaguered little group, yes. Usually care is provided by women, and we all know why. It's in the DNA. It comes from the Old English and German grieving and lamenting. So this is where it brings us into this area that we're all dealing with today. And the Old Norse sick bed, Latin, to cure. And this is one of the problems that we have with care around end of life. Because everyone now in the medical world thinks that there's a cure for death. That's why you've got to go to hospital, because that's where all the cures are. Hospitals have cures. They can fix it, or if they can't fix it, you sort of won't know it happened until you get the phone call. There are learned books and articles written about this concept. It's an unequal concept of healing and helping. It's when someone, however kind and well-meaning, does something to someone else. They care for them. The well helping the sick, the professional helping the lay, the knowledgeable helping the ignorant. Now, there was another slide that got left out somehow or other, I didn't put it in, which is about what is the meaning of compassion. Now, compassion is very different. It elides with care, but it is different. It comes from the Latin or French, and it means sympathy, empathy, showing mercy. It's something you do together with the other person or people, in association with them. It's not doing to, it's doing with. And I, last night, something I'd never done before, I looked up all the words beginning with com. Thanks to Google, they're all there. Compassion, compatible, complement, companions, commiserate, communicate, comrade, comfort, company, and commit. And this is very different to care. Not that I'm putting down care, because you need care with the compassion. And for all you Lunig fans, care is the cure, it is slow, it is raw, it is pure, it is simple and bare, it is real, it is bold, it is there. Nothing is newer or older or wiser or truer. Care is the cure. That's the thing. There's no cure for death. So we have to bring in something else. This gives you a little bit of an idea of what compassion is about. Good old Piglet and Pooh. Piglet sidled up to Pooh from behind. "Pooh," he whispered. "Yes, Piglet." "Nothing," said Piglet, taking Pooh's hand. "I just wanted to be sure of you." That's compassion. That's being there with. Not necessarily having to do anything. When someone's grieving, it's one of the rules. You don't have to say anything. You just have to be there with the person. The people are very keen to say something nice, say something helpful. Anyone who works, and I imagine there's a lot of people in here who are working in the area of grief and bereavement, they know just to be with, compassionately, as a comrade. Compassionate communities have an academic base. They're a public health movement. Death and dying are everyone's responsibility, equal partner, sustainable and rewarding. It's an international movement. This is where the Compassionate Cities comes in. Now, in the community, 95% of end-of-life care is provided by non-professional, informal, formal carers. And only 5% is provided by professionals, who are all great. And usually, I mean, a young colleague said, what shall I go into? What area of medicine shall I go into? And I said, either public health or palliative care, because I do believe that they are most open to the caring, preventive approach. So they're great, and I'm sure everyone has, in their palliative care teams, have seen the professionals. But they can only, because of the sustainability and the numbers, they can only be there for 5% of the time. And when we say informal care, we include televisions. In aged care facilities, the most present carer is the television. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. I think a person is probably better. Oh, something going to come? There we go. So this is a social movement for social change. Give a family a fish, that's charitable. Teach a family to fish, that makes it more sustainable. Organise a community-based intergenerational fishing collective, and you have social change. That's what we're doing. There are many forms of this. Or wait, have a look on the web, there's some great ones, but that's a fishing one, which is nice. So, what are we doing at CCNB?
Okay, well, you have to give me this little thing that's not a microphone. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, thank you. We shouldn't let Stephen go on the web. He comes up with lots of little cartoons. How many more minutes?
You've got 10.
10 minutes, that's fantastic. Oh, that's fantastic. On Saturday night, I raced out of my study, and my husband and my daughter were watching a movie. It was about 10:30 at night. I said, we're moving to New Zealand. And my daughter says, have you been watching JA YouTube things again, Jacinda Ardern? And I said, as a matter of fact, I have. Her wellbeing budget. She's all about kindness. And I know that Stephen and I have often talked about that, where you have a leader who's actually using the words that we in this sector have been using for a very long time, who is beginning to behave like we in this sector are behaving in a very long time. I tell you, no joke, I want to go to New Zealand, if of course it was a little bit warmer. But it's another story. We are trying, and we are all working together, and there is some great stuff happening in the community. But at CCNB, we're working with people like Kate and others in this room and beyond to really begin to talk about compassionate communities to anybody that wants to listen. Because it's nebulous, but those words that you used to describe it at the beginning of the session were spot on. We are working to build a movement, as Stephen has rightly said. We are actively recruiting leaders, a bit like missionaries. We're absolutely going out there. Who is on? Who wants to build better, warmer, closer, caring communities? What about you start in your own neighbourhood? And we are recruiting people who want to be compassionate champions. Kate, for example, is one. In her spare time, she said, yeah, I'll be a compassionate champion. I get this. I do this. I do it in my own life, and I do it to support other people as well. We are also supporting people at their families through end of life, through informal systems. We are linking people who have lived experience of supporting their loved one at end of life and going through that tremendously change time for them, who have come through the other end and saying, look, I think I've learned something through that experience. I can sit beside somebody and help them through their experience. And I think for those of us who work with people with MND, that is particularly a useful opportunity to support people who have gone through the loss of their loved one because of MND, and support their carer and family through that. We are raising awareness through a whole range of things, but one of them is a legacy art wall, things I want to do before I die. And we're working with council on getting that wall up in a prominent location. Just a few little issues there, but we're working on that. And we're certainly part of a national research project because all those decision makers want evidence, don't they, Stephen? Evidence, evidence. So we're trying to kind of up the ante and working with Professor Debbie Horsfall and others to begin to build some evidence that this compassionate approach actually works, and it works on a number of things, in a number of ways. It helps decrease the costs, which of course lots of politicians love, but it absolutely helps to increase the health and wellbeing outcomes of people.